Welcome to Educate Us, a podcast and learning collective that explores the questions shaping education. Through conversations with educators, researchers, scholars, students, and community members, we examine the relationship between learning and lived experience. Together, we explore new possibilities for education and its role in the world around us. I am Dr. Tiffany Smith, educator, curriculum designer, researcher, founder, and host of Educate Us. Thank you for joining. Let's begin. Hey, everybody. Welcome back. We are on episode 7 of the Educate Us podcast. As you know, I am Dr. Tiffany Smith. I wanted to come on here and show my face. We've gone through 6 episodes so far this summer, and I'm so happy to announce that we're on the 7th. It has been incredible watching this community grow. So many friends and colleagues have come together to give you an amazing season. And there's so much more to go. We have some conversations coming up with leaders as far as Europe and as east as South Carolina and New York. So stay tuned for those. So much more to come. Today, I am especially excited to introduce Dr. Shannon Koropchak. Dr. Koropchak serves as the director of co-curricular programming in the English department at John Burroughs School here in St. Louis. She teaches English 8 and English 3, so she's working with some of the middle school and the high school students. She sponsors the school's Works in Progress creative writing and art magazine and the Hague Model United Nations program. Dr. Koropchak has earned her bachelor's degree from the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, and both her master's and doctorate in English and American literature from Washington University here in St. Louis. Before joining John Burroughs, she taught at Washington University and at the International Black Sea University in the Republic of Georgia. We just can't get enough of Georgia. Today's conversation explores what it means to cultivate thoughtful, engaged, and globally minded learners. This is a shift in our conversation. We've been talking about agency, and now we're getting into how do we move beyond agency and to begin having insight into the things that surface. So here we go. Let's jump into episode 7. Episode 7 coming up. Welcome back to the Educate Us podcast. Today's episode is titled From Observation to Insight, and we're exploring one of the most important transitions in authentic learning. Helping students move beyond gathering information and begin making meaning from it. Within the Educate Us curriculum model, students engage in observation, interviews, site visits, documentation, and research. However, the ultimate goal is not simply collecting information, it is helping students recognize patterns, question assumptions, examine perspectives, develop deeper insight into the world, basically. We're excited to welcome Shannon, and I need to get this last name right, and that's something we didn't talk about. So if I don't get this last name right,
that's totally fine. There's a reason that my students call me
Koropchak.
Oh, there you go. You got it. Totally.
All the way?
Yeah. There's a reason that my students call me Dr. K, just because it's just there are too many consonants. It's easy, but you got it. So you're all good.
From John Burroughs School. And you know, in the interview with Ellie and Sarah, I said John Burroughs in St. Louis. John Burroughs is technically in Ladue, Missouri, outside of St. Louis. I am so happy to have you.
But we even advertise as being in St. Louis because no one knows where Ladue is. So that's.
I mean, it's all a part of the St. Louis experience for me. My son graduated from Ladue High School.
Oh, no kidding. Just right down the road from us.
Yep. Lots of friends at John Burroughs. He went to New City School. So a lot of those kids ended up going to John Burroughs. A lot of crossover. So grateful to have you. To begin, can you please introduce yourself and share just a little bit with our audience about your background in English education, co-curricular programming, and help us to understand how you help students think critically about the world.
That's a lot. So I'll start with
Yeah.
me. So I've been teaching since 2007. So I think that I counted this year that actually that makes it, this is my 20th year of teaching. So I
Okay.
started at WashU when I was in graduate school
Hmm.
and taught in a whole bunch of different departments there, including the Rec Comp department. And then I worked with the
I didn't
Mellon
know
Mays
WashU
program.
had rec, huh?
They do. Well, it's called college writing at this point. So yeah,
Hmm.
all freshmen are required to take college writing. And so in the English department there, we staffed a lot of those classes.
Hmm.
But I also worked with the film department at some point. I worked with the Mellon Mays program, which helps underrepresented student populations learn about graduate level research. So that was great to work with students for a little bit longer at some upper levels. I taught abroad in
Nice.
Georgia. I've worked with teachers across borders in
Okay.
Cambodia doing teacher
Hmm.
training. And at
Let
this
me
point,
ask you, did they have blackouts in Cambodia?
not while I was there. I mean, this was years ago that I
Mhm.
was doing it, but we didn't have blackouts. You got a lot of rain, a lot of rain.
Mhm.
There So in the schools, there's no power in the schools or very little power. I think probably just a few rooms have power because they just have really, really open classrooms and they don't have air conditioning or lights or things like that. And so I think even if there were a power outage, you wouldn't know.
Oh.
Um, so it's, but so it's kind of, if you want to be humbled in terms of, and as an educator, go to a place like, Siem Reap or Phnom Penh and sit in a classroom with a teacher who has one teacher and 60 students. And then you realize, whoo, okay, I have it easy. So I've, taught in a number of different places
Yeah.
and then currently at John Burroughs School. So I
Hmm.
teach juniors. I've taught eighth graders and I've taught 11th graders for a long time. But now I also serve as the director of special programming. My title's kind of changed a few times over the years. And that really involves co-curricular programming where we are
Mm.
designing experiences for students that are non-traditional. They're not in a traditional classroom.
Mhm.
And I work with Sarah and I actually work with Ellie on some of those projects, but I work with Sarah on a lot of those
Mhm.
projects.
Mhm.
So my work is
Mhm.
part-time curriculum design. That's a lot of what I do, is curriculum
Mhm.
design, and then
Mhm.
part-time in the classroom.
Mhm.
And thinking a lot as well about like how do we,
What a treat.
yeah, how can we take what we've learned about the value of non-traditional, co-curricular learning, and how can we bring as much of that as we can into the classroom? It's not possible
Mhm.
completely, but how can we bring in even little bits? I also teach, I work with the Model United Nations program, and we do a lot with students where we take them abroad and do a lot of prep work with them along the same lines of what you're talking about in terms of preparing to enter a world and really think about who you are in that world and
Mhm.
rethink your assumptions about the world. So we do a
Mhm.
lot of work with them in those terms. And I've been all over the world, not all over the world. I've been to the Netherlands, I've been to Qatar, I've been to Greece with students, and then we're hoping to go to, or we're planning to go to Ireland and Germany next year. But all of
Wow.
that requires a lot of prep work with the students to get
Mhm.
them to really think about, okay, how am I going to walk into this space
Mhm.
and not just immediately
Mhm.
sort of get into like I like or I dislike this space, but how can you
Mhm.
actually see it? How can
Mhm.
you see it in a way that
That's rhetoric.
you can appreciate where you are in different ways. So anyway, that's all to say that I do a lot of this work in a lot of different spaces
Mhm.
in my job. So, and it's all very fun.
Oh my God. Sounds so good. That is 100% rhetoric. That's what
Hmm.
rhetoric does. That's what it prepares you to do. And
Hmm.
it really gives you a comfort when you
Hmm.
walk into a foreign space because you don't have to shift, even
Hmm.
though the physical has changed. My students tell me they never see the world again the same
Hmm.
after my class. They're like,
Hmm.
I can't go into a restaurant or anywhere and
Hmm.
just be in that space anymore
Hmm.
because I see everything.
Hmm.
And it's like once the blinders are off, they're off.
No, I mean it does take one sort of mental energy, right, to do it. I think that that's one thing is that it takes a lot. It can sometimes be painful, I think, to see the world and observe that much of it.
Hmm.
I think for some
Hmm.
people that could be really overwhelming because it probably involves um picking at some things that you might have learned as a kid or that you've been taught by your parents. And so, yeah, I think it's a really challenging position to be in because, like you said,
You bring up a really good point with that because that is part of the process
Mhm.
in your awareness is that what was completely familiar and comfortable is also now a part of your scrutiny.
And I think that again, so this, a lot of the ways that I've done this work is by helping students, or is in order to help students move from their comfortable, familiar environment to, being in some sort of international setting.
Hmm.
And we really think carefully about, we have them just sort of say, okay, what do you identify about your own culture? You kind of got to start with yourself, like, and
Hmm.
then you got to think about, like, what do you think people think about us, right? What are your assumptions about what the world thinks about us? What are your assumptions about, the Netherlands or, whatever country that we're going to? And, and then, yeah, kind of just prepping them to I really think the most important thing is to get out of the what our tendency I think so often, which is to say, I like that, I don't like that. Like it's
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
often, especially when we walk
Hmm.
into a space where we're not familiar, we are in this very judging mode. And so
Hmm.
we will say, you just walk into a new country and you're like, I like the way they do that, I don't like the way they do that.
Hmm.
And if what I tell students is if you can step away from that, then you can just actually see what's there. I say, because if you're trying so hard to decide what you like or don't like the whole
Hmm.
time,
Hmm.
then you're going to miss stuff.
Hmm.
You're actually going to miss things. And the tricky thing is that in all these spaces, on some level, things are working, right? People
Hmm.
are choosing to live in the system, and no matter what it is, whether you're living with blackouts that we were talking about or whatever,
Hmm.
people have found a way to live in it. On some level, it is functioning for them, and they've found a way to function. And it's not to say that you have to even like or dislike that, but you have to just sort of acknowledge that it is working,
Hmm.
right? There's something that's working there. And so I think getting them out of that like dislike
Hmm.
tendency, um, when we've been able to do that, like I've had students come up to me, like we were in Qatar, which I knew was going to be a big jump for a lot of kids because
Hmm.
boy, we were for the most part, we had some students of color on the trip, but we didn't have a lot of students who were Muslim.
Hmm.
And so this was really a space for a lot of kids where they were in the minority in for the first time in their lives.
Hmm.
And that was really
Mm,
interesting. And so
mm,
we took
mm,
them to a state mosque, we took them to and we took them all around and we talked again and again about like, look,
mhm,
the people are going to share what's important to them. People are
mhm,
going to share about how they see the world. And I really want you to try to get out of this. I like, I dislike, I
mhm.
agree, I disagree
Because they'll
with.
miss it. They'll miss it. They'll
Exactly.
miss it. And the reflection allows them to come back to their own beliefs if they
Hmm.
need to, lean into that. But
Hmm.
they won't even be able to reflect if they didn't really hear what they said and were
Exactly.
open to that.
So
Oh
another
my God.
one of the quotes that I start the year with for the students is, which is a quote that I heard at a conference years ago, and I just liked it so much that it's just kind of stuck with me.
Hmm.
And it is a sign of an educated mind to be able to consider an idea without accepting it.
Hmm.
And when you realize that,
Period.
I
Indoctrination is the worst thing we could ever do.
well, and I think that it also the way I often present that is that it that kind of mindset, it gives you a freedom because it
Mhm.
says you we can it means that we can consider absolutely any idea and
Absolutely.
you don't have to walk away with a thing. Now I admit, is it likely that you're going to walk away from this discussion with no new questions, no new ideas? No, it's not that likely.
Mm-hmm.
But by saying that it is possible, that then it sort of frees them. There's a little bit of that sort of safety of like, but it means that we can literally talk about anything because you don't, if you do not want to change, if you are so set in, if you're not ready, I think to maybe peel at some of those layers of that onion, in terms of, whatever, beliefs you've learned from your parents. I mean, we all at some point come to appreciate certain things that our parents have taught us and realize that we disagree with some of those things. And some people are ready for that, and some people aren't ready for that.
Yep.
And if you're not ready for that, it gives you the freedom to go, I don't have to take a thing
Mm.
from this conversation, but I can still have it.
Yep.
And
And
so,
without feeling like I have to dim or diminish who I
mhm,
am or where I am in my
mhm,
progression because I'm open.
mhm,
Nobody's perspective, even if it's different or opposed to mine,
mhm,
diminishes the perspective that I have in that space.
mhm.
It creates
Yeah.
extreme openness. All right, let's get into it. So, within the Educate Us curriculum model,
Mhm,
students often spend significant time observing and documenting communities. I've actually even partnered with, and one of the prior podcasts is with this director. His name is Sidney McGee. He directs a new, I guess, community space in the Grove called Damned Good People.
mhm.
It has
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's right down where I live. So I know
have
what
you
you're talking about.
seen that? Have you
Yeah, I
seen
drive
it?
by it all the time.
Right. So I have the opportunity to actually host or pilot a group of students in that space.
Oh, cool.
And so what I would love to do in the second part of a three-part curriculum
Hmm.
is get them in the space and let them navigate the space on the first floor with the coffee shop and the uh, garage up. And, so I'm thinking maybe like 12, real small group.
Hmm.
And they choose for themselves how they
Hmm.
want to situate themselves within the space. If they want to get coffee, if they want to sit down, if they want to get laptop out, if they want to group up with friends, but while they're doing it, they're paying attention to what they're paying attention to.
Hmm.
So if you choose to group up with friends, that's fine, but capture it in some way, video, snap a selfie, whatever,
Hmm.
comes to you, because that image will become a representation of your intention
Hmm.
in that moment. If you choose to get coffee, that's fine. Capture something as you're getting that coffee. Capture the barista if you choose to. And if you do choose to capture the barista, then when
Hmm.
we go upstairs on the second floor in that space and we have a conversation, we want to know, why did you choose the barista?
Hmm.
What about that drew your attention? And if it's I don't know, then give them some space to think and process that, because from the observation, we're drawing the insight, right?
Hmm.
Here's the question though. Why
Hmm.
do you think students sometimes struggle
Hmm.
to get into that space? To move from noticing things
Hmm.
to actually, why is that sometimes a struggle?
I was thinking about this because I was thinking way back to the assignment that I mentioned that we did at WashU, where we literally would have them pick a space on campus
Mm-hmm.
and then analyze the space and think about like what is being suggested within the space, try to do
Mm-hmm.
some reflection on it. And, there were some students for whom this was a relatively easy exercise. And then for some students, they, I think some of it is like I think this could be a couple different things. I think on some level, um, in a space like a big common area or yeah, coffee shop or something like that, there can be so much going on that I think your brain almost doesn't know sort of where to start.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that there can be I'm sort of overloaded. So it's hard to figure out like, okay, what do I even focus on? What do I even write down? And I
Mm-hmm.
think that some of that is the desire to sort of have an answer for something and sort of an a difficulty with sitting in sort of the discomfort of what is the collection process. I haven't talked to my students about that the brainstorming process is the collection process. And I said, this is big, this is broad, and you need to just be writing down all these different notes, whether you're talking about a space for an analysis or whether you're like doing a creative piece or whatever. I said, we're in collection, collection, collection. And the kind of questions that I'll often get are, okay, but when I write my thing, I want it like, and they're trying to like hammer it down. They're trying to nail it down. They're trying to imagine the thing. And I will point to them and I will say, right now, you're trying to imagine something and you haven't even decided what format you want to do it in.
Mm-hmm.
You haven't figured out who your main character is. You haven't like all these things. I said, we're not there.
Mm-hmm.
We're in the collection phase. And I think that some of that comes from, like I said, either sort of being, I think people just being overwhelmed with what's there and
Mm-hmm.
overwhelmed with the idea of the uncertainty. And they have some of it is helping them to
Mm-hmm.
sit in that uncertainty and go, I'm not trying to make a decision right now. I'm not trying to reach a conclusion right now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just trying to sort of sit and write down what I see. And I think that it's separating those two pieces
Mm-hmm.
of the again, the observer and the analyst.
Mm-hmm.
Because, the way I was taught to teach analysis was to break it up into three steps. You
Mm-hmm.
first observe the what is actually there, what do you see? Then you have to talk about how do these, how am I seeing some patterns here? How am I
Mm-hmm.
seeing something that matters?
Mm-hmm.
How am I seeing like things come together? And then why does it matter? Right? In that final conclusion stage. And so
Mm-hmm.
you can't, I'll explain to them, you can't come to some sort of conclusion if you haven't sat with that what and kind of the discomfort
Mm-hmm.
of the what and not knowing what you're seeing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that that's some of it is I think it's just people don't like sitting in uncertainty, and some of it's helping them
How do you
do that.
comfort them during that time? And then remind me to tell you about the microethnography, but how do you comfort? How do you provide ease for that?
I think some of it is by simply pointing out what they're doing and pointing out and having them and having them say, okay, right now you're uncomfortable and asking them questions.
Self-awareness.
Yeah. Are you uncomfortable because right now you're trying to imagine what your essay is going to look like or you don't know what your conclusion is or what you're going to argue and so you're like uncomfortable with that. Are you uncomfortable because you can't see this thing? And then almost always that's the answers or frequently I should say. And they're like, "Yes, that's I just," and I'll say, "Okay. So what I'm not asking you to do that yet. You have to like so I think some of it is helping them see that that's what's going on again that like you said that self-awareness of
Mhm.
this is why I'm uncomfortable and recognizing just being aware that they're trying to do a step that's down the road and promising them you're going to get to that step
Mhm.
but you need to stay here first.
Yeah.
So there are just so many pieces of the writing process that people try to smash all into one,
Mhm.
whether that's again data collection or creation or whatever or
Mhm.
editing and writing. I mean, I often talk to my students about that you can't be a creator and an editor at the same time. Your creator is just coming up with ideas. It's kind of the same thing, the brainstorming, and your
Mhm.
editor is going, nope, that's wrong, nope, that's wrong. And that's why you write type. And I'll ask them, are you just finding yourself sitting there in front of the computer screen going type delete, type delete, type delete? And I said, and they'll say, yes, this is
Mhm.
why this is so painful. I'm just
Mhm.
stuck here. And I said, because you're trying to be a creator and you're trying to be editor at the same time.
Yep.
And you have to separate those steps.
Mhm. Mhm.
Let yourself just write and don't let yourself stop. And I
Mhm.
said, and so again, a lot of it is just about separating out those steps and go and promising that the next step is coming. I think that that helps to be
Mhm.
like you after 10 minutes, you then get to go back and figure out what are your best nuggets, but
Mhm.
not yet. That step
Well,
comes later.
I teach in that step. I teach in that process. And in the
Hmm.
beginning of the process, they do a lot. Well, throughout it, honestly, they do a lot of what I call meditations.
Hmm.
And it is a literal meditation. So what they
Hmm.
do is they have to release their thinking. We call it a
Hmm.
free write, right? We used to do
Hmm.
it pen and paper. You
Hmm.
go. You don't stop. Whatever
Hmm.
comes, you keep going. It's off topic.
Hmm.
Doesn't matter. Get back on topic. Da 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 da.
Hmm.
Da. So it's when they're doing that meditation, what they're doing is they're aligning the inner with the outer and allowing that flow to happen, which is often what impedes their ability to be able to get anything out. Let me ask you, so in the unit that I do, it's not just a spatial analysis. The one that I developed for 12th grade doesn't include the microethnography piece, but the microethnography piece in the higher ed classroom requires them to go to that space 3 times. The first time they go to the space, they are asking the what, and they are focused on the physical. And I do try to get them away from telling me about everything that they see and really begin to just let us see what it is that they focus on. So if you focused on the barista the whole time that you were there, that's fine. Just allow me to see that. And so I want them to objectify, but even moving them from objectification, from that physical material, and they're used to that, right? Adjectives, words that describe, the brown chair, the da, da, da. And so moving them from that observation to that insight, that questioning, that that deeper analysis in terms of that gap has been a very difficult one to fill for me. How do you close that gap?
I mean, I think sometimes I think part of what happens with the gap is the fear of writing something that's wrong. And I would say that in the 20 years now that I've been teaching composition in some sense, I feel like students are becoming more and more this makes me feel super old. In the olden days, kids were more likely, more willing to, but I think that kids are becoming more hesitant to write something that they think is wrong. And that's a whole other podcast about where that's coming from. But some of it is giving them permission to write something that
Absolutely.
they may say is incorrect. And so what I often will have them do is I'll have them say, just start with maybe. And I'll ask for some maybes, or I'll have them actually literally just start with maybe, because it's amazing how the word maybe gives you permission to write down something that you're like, it's just a maybe. I'm not committing to it. I'm not saying this is absolutely right, but it lets you start getting down words. Maybe it's because of blah, blah, blah. Maybe, maybe I wonder why he blah, 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 blah. But I think that that's something that has worked really well for students, both in discussions and in writing, where it just gives them permission to say what's in their head that they're either afraid to say or they're even having a hard time expressing because they are so caught up on, but what if I say the wrong thing? And what will she think of me? And it's amazing when you ask kids how much, like if you're thinking about, if you're trying to get them to focus on a space, have you ever asked your students how much they're focusing on the other people and what the other people might think of them and what they say in the space? At least with my kids, I'm amazed by, I mean, students, I mean, again, I'm sure you've seen the same thing. Like when students do, because they write a lot of personal reflections, things like that, I'm amazed by what they're willing to tell me. And then they'll tell me how worried they are and how much of their brain power is being used to question, but what if he thinks this about me? And what if this gets posted about in social media? And what if she tells, like, if you're thinking about gaps and them not being able
what
to
age? What age is that? What age is that?
So these are 11th graders. So these are 16, 17 years old. And so they're not too far from the students you're talking about. I would be curious to know, are they asking some of the same questions in this world? Because this is a generation of kids who have been trained on social media to worry about every single thing that they say because there is a consequence and there is often a record of some sort and there's the risk of a record and it's doing something to their brains. But I mean, our kids really do. They'll tell me that they are so worried about saying the
That's
wrong
something
thing.
to keep in mind.
I mean, it's just a chunk of their brain, literally, that is that they either have to figure out how to let go of, which I think is a big ask, given that there's this whole world that we don't have access to. There's a whole life that they're living that we don't have access to that is training their brains to think in a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
Because, and I mean, I mean, they'll tell me again, if we come back to sort of what are all their kind of concerns, about, like we said, peeling back the onion and things,
Mm-hmm.
they they'll write in their personal essays to me, and they'll realize, they will unpick something about, yeah, their parents or parenting style or something like that that's really bothered them.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right, they don't quite have the tools yet. I mean, our kids are quite mature for their age in general, but they're
Mm-hmm.
still 16, 17, and they don't have all the tools. And so they do still really worry about
Mm-hmm.
damaging relationships by saying something that they think is mean, right? Rather than saying, like, and they don't quite know how to have a hard conversation. I mean, that's something that I've worked with students on. It's like, okay, well, how do we have this hard conversation? What are the tools for a hard conversation? How do we engage with it? What does this mean about how we listen to each other? Like, it's just something that they don't have, and they unfortunately don't have a ton of good models, right? I mean, what they see out there is they see terrible models of
Yeah,
communication.
in a
I
lot of
don't, there's,
cases.
yeah, I mean, like beyond home, they may be
Mm-hmm.
seeing good models at home, but
Mm-hmm.
even if they're seeing good models at home, they're still in their, which is age appropriate, right? But they're still in the brain development stage where, because their prefrontal cortex is not fully developed,
Mm-hmm.
your parent says, "Hey, take out the garbage," and you're like, "Why are you yelling at me?" And that's because
Mm-hmm.
they don't even know how to read
Yeah.
emotions in the same way that adults do. And so they're
Mm-hmm.
working with their hands, one hand tied behind
Mm-hmm.
their back. They literally just don't have access to all the tools at this point. So I think um that's a big part of
Yeah.
this as
Let me
well.
let me ask you this. So, how do you get them into the space of questioning their assumptions? So we're
Hmm.
talking about, and these assumptions could be based on things that they've been taught at home. No, nothing against
Hmm.
parents. I mean, parent, I was a parent for 21 years. It's a hard job. You do the
Hmm.
very best that you can. You give your children the direction and the guidance based on what you know at that particular time. So no
Hmm.
disrespect there, but when they start developing assumptions about how they're moving around in the world based on this guidance versus questioning their own belief,
Hmm.
that's the space that we're getting into. And their beliefs could potentially align with how they've been, it doesn't have to be a
Hmm.
negative. It could be, you know what? And I honestly feel very confident that I believe such and so, and my parents do too. So it could
Hmm.
be that. But how do you get them in that space where they're questioning their assumptions, questioning what they believe?
Um, I mean, this kind of comes back to the idea of, how do you, some of that just comes from being willing to have a conversation that isn't just a performance. I mean, I talk with the kids at the very beginning of the year where I say, like, look, I'm so uninterested in just having you all tell me what you think that either I want to hear or that you think is what you should say. I said,
100%.
yeah, because I said that's just a performance of a conversation and
Hmm.
that's not a real conversation. And that's actually where we bring in the
I
one
love
quotation.
that.
So where we said that, the idea that the sign of an educated mind, it's a sign of an educated mind to be able to consider an idea without accepting it. So we talk about that and what that means. We
Hmm.
also talk about the set of rules for constructive arguing, and we
Hmm.
use those at some, to kind of think about, like, what are the rules for having, like, hard conversations. Sometimes I call them brave conversations, which can be a little cheesy, but I think it
Where
does
you're
acknowledge.
constantly negotiating how far to push a boundary, and
Yeah.
so it's almost like you're in the conversation with the person, but you're also what we would call mindful, right?
Hmm.
Of the engagement that's happening in that moment. And that's that disconnect. That's your inner
Hmm.
mind being
Hmm.
aware of a physical, practical occurrence.
Yeah, and it's definitely, but to get there, to
Yes.
get to the point where you can even question,
Uh-huh.
means that you have to be in a space again where you can hear what someone else is saying, go, huh,
Mhm.
that's
Yeah.
interesting. So there's a set of these 5 rules that I have posted in
And
my
still
classroom that
have
I
the
love.
confidence to maintain your position if
Hmm.
you still feel confident in what you believe. I
Hmm.
love that. Being open to literally hearing, like listening to what it is that they have to say. So the conversation is one piece. What else do you do? What else do you
Well,
do?
I was going to run through the rules that we talk
Yeah.
about. So one is argue like you're right. That's the first step. One is argue like you're right. And we talk about why is that the case. And they say, well, in order to argue like you're right, you have to have evidence. You have to argue from some, like, and then you have to listen like you're wrong, which means that you
Okay.
have to acknowledge that someone else is also coming from a space where they have some sort of evidence. There's a reason
I
why they've come
like
to this
that.
conclusion. You have to argue to learn, not to win. So stop trying to get someone, stop trying to,
Mm,
get the thing, but actually when they're debating with you, truly listen and say
mhm.
like, oh, I'm
Ooh, argue to learn. I love
yeah,
that.
trust that it's exactly what you're talking about, which is being open to the real conversation. And we talk about the idea of having the topic at the center and not your
Mhm.
ego, because the second that you put your
Mm,
ego at the center,
mm,
then
mm,
you're trying
mm.
to win. And then you're not actually focusing on solving something, understanding
Mhm.
something, anything like that.
Even when you might be the topic of conversation and the people might be saying something to help you, but you can't
Mhm.
hear because you're
Exactly.
defending over and over and over again. And I have this ability to recognize the insanity loop when people fall into it,
Hmm.
to the point where I lose my patience and I say, okay, you said that 4 times.
Hmm. So the it's actually my fiance says something. I think you have to sort of recognize at some point um, that people come to conclusions in a lot of different ways, and if
Mhm,
you enter a conversation just trying to convince them of something, then again you're going to miss stuff,
mhm,
and you really risk, like, you can't guarantee what someone's going to say on the other end, and so, like, you can't, or what they're going to conclude, or that you, like, if you set that as your goal, you're just missing out. But my fiance always said that you can't use logic to get someone out of an argument that they didn't use logic to get themselves into. And
wait a
people,
minute. Pause it.
yeah,
You can-
you can't use logic to
Uh-huh.
get someone out of an argument that they didn't use logic to get themselves into. Sometimes
Okay.
people just come to conclusions because they feel it. They want the thing to be right or whatever. And again,
Mhm.
if you make the goal to
You
convince
can't
them of
use
something.
logic if you haven't questioned your own belief. You won't
Hmm.
even have the tools to be able to say that 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 is 4,
Hmm.
right? You won't even have the tools to be able to do it because you haven't questioned your own belief. You've just accepted it for what it
Hmm.
is without
Yeah.
questioning it. And then when you get questioned, now you're defensive because you can't defend your position.
Hmm.
You can't.
Well, and
Yeah.
you can't defend your position, and this is, I mean, this is the situation that we see so often with people in debates now, or what we call debates, but where all they're doing is just trying to beat the other person, as opposed to
Mhm.
going, wow, okay, you've come to this conclusion for a reason. I truly just want to understand why.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not trying to change your mind. I am truly here in that state of trying to just learn. And I would love it if you also would try to learn why I came to my conclusion. And then let's just
Mhm.
see what happens if we do
Mhm.
that. And yeah, so I work with students on that process, and you got to remind them of that process. We kind of come up with class rules where we talk about, what does that actually look like? What does
Mhm.
this mean that we have to agree to as a class in order for this kind of debate to happen?
Mhm.
So that people are, again, are willing to move beyond performance, and they're willing to say things that even become interesting because they're willing to have a disagreement,
Mhm.
rather than saying only what they think the other people in the room want to say. Because that's the tricky thing that I've been running into is, again, we can't even have an interesting debate because people are just so focused on not saying the wrong thing. And so we
Mhm.
can't even sort of, yeah, explore a concept of like, well, what if? Like, so I think
Mhm.
it's, again, a lot of it is opening up how, like, talking very directly about how we have that conversation and how we look at the world and how we listen to each other.
Mhm.
Um, giving people the freedom to walk away and take nothing, right? And you don't, so I think it's a lot of stuff like that. And does it work for everybody? No, not everybody's ready for that. But does it work for some people? Yeah, I've seen it
Yeah.
work for some people.
Yep. 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 And eventually, with enough exposure to that, it'll eventually, I believe, work for them too, because
Hmm.
they'll come to appreciate the power in
Hmm.
actually being honest about what they
Hmm.
do and do not know. Let me ask you,
Hmm.
how does it show up in the practical work that they do? So, are they expressing this, and how are you? Because, for example, when students in my class are doing the microethnography and they're
Hmm.
going to the location each of these 3 times,
Hmm.
they're downloading or processing this information into a newsletter. They've
Hmm.
been exposed to a template in Google,
Hmm.
and this template is already situated in the newsletter genre. It
Hmm.
has placeholders for imaging and captioning for the image. It has a text section at the bottom for them. So, for example, when they go and they look at the space and they question the what, that
Hmm.
goes in the first newsletter. And
Hmm.
then the next newsletter, when they go back a second time, they're
Hmm.
downloading that information into the next newsletter that's focused on a different aspect of the work associated with the observation that they're doing. And so,
Hmm.
and ultimately, and the reason I do it that way is because I'm also reinforcing and teaching multimodal composition. So I want them thinking about the ways in which the text they've added complements the image they've added,
Hmm.
and how, everything is aligned with their intention for what they want us to take away from what they're
Hmm.
sharing. So, how does this thinking processing work that you do, how does that manifest? Like, what does it become, or does it become anything?
It becomes lots of different kinds of
Yeah.
things. So like the final project, the satire project that I was talking about, there's a reason why it's the final project of the year because it's the
Hmm.
most complicated, and it definitely requires them to work in multiple mediums. It's literally a mixed media piece,
Hmm.
and I give them the freedom, and I say that they can mock anything that they want. However, the
Hmm.
one guideline I put around that is that we talk about the difference between a regular satire where it's like a satire that generally wants to change something about the world and
Hmm.
is sort of frustrated with things and might want to like you want to have a message at the end. And a
Hmm.
postmodern satire where you're just sort of embracing the absurdity of the situation and
Hmm.
you're not mad because I'm trying
Hmm.
to help the students and
Which is
like
still an
practice.
intention, even if they're
Oh yeah.
embracing the absurdity, it's still an intention. But yeah.
Totally. But I see it as a tool for the world. I said, because look, you can't
Hmm.
control so much of the stuff in the world. If you
Hmm.
can laugh at it, you're
Yeah.
going to have a better time rather than
Yeah.
just getting frustrated. But we also
Seriously.
distinguish and we say there are things that I can laugh at in that way and just go, whew, my God, it's so beautiful. It's just
Hmm.
gorgeous. It's so ridiculous that it's gorgeous.
Hmm.
And then there are things that I get mad at and I can't laugh at in that way. And so helping
Hmm.
them first get to distinguish between what can we laugh at in that way versus the other way.
Hmm.
Um, but the assignment
Is that to make
then,
sure that topics are safe and
mhm,
people don't lean into things that could be harmful? Okay.
exactly.
Hmm.
Yeah. So we,
Hmm.
we distinguish between that. We look at different examples of that. We talk through what that looks like and everything. And I just check in with them over and over again. Is this something that you're laughing about at the end? And they're like,
Hmm.
yes, I'm totally
Hmm.
still laughing about
Hmm.
this. Great.
Hmm.
Okay.
I
Because
love
I
that.
think that with the
Hmm.
idea of laughter, again, I want them to be fully open to exploring. Like I'm trying to think of so I've got one of them was looking at the NFL draft and sort of all of the pageantry and the ridiculousness around. And this is something that he absolutely loves. And that's often
Hmm.
something I'll encourage them to do is pick something that
Hmm.
you know well, because then you'll know the tropes of it. And
I
I said, and
love
the
that
tricky thing is
question.
you've got to step in to, and you've got to find this way to defamiliarize something that you're so familiar with, that
Mm-hmm.
you love, and that you love so much that you're willing to poke fun at. And
Mm-hmm.
so I had
And
kids
that's
do the
exactly why I let them choose their own space
yeah.
so that they are in something that's familiar, but it becomes
Mhm.
familiar. And so that duality and that
Mhm.
separation begins to happen. But
And
how does that look when they are all, how do you think that would play out if they're all in? So, for example, if we did a coffee shop,
mhm.
and when I first started teaching this, I started teaching this at Georgia State University, and there's a
Mhm.
Starbucks on, across the way. And
Mhm.
outside of this Starbucks, there are a tremendous number of homeless people.
Mhm.
Not, I mean, just on the corners, sleeping on the corners, sleeping on the sidewalk. You
Mhm.
know, you almost have to go through this little shrine to get into the Starbucks. And so
Mhm.
there's a dichotomy happening right there. There's like two different
Mhm.
worlds
Someone
operating in
paying
the
$8
same
for a
world,
coffee.
right?
Yeah.
And so that I took that opportunity to really get them thinking about and questioning something so familiar, such as Starbucks, and
Mhm.
really thinking about what you're inside buying a $10 coffee while somebody's outside
Mhm.
hungry,
Mhm.
and how that, shows up. But what do you think the benefit is if they're all going to the same space? So they can't choose their own space. They would all
Mhm.
have to go to a coffee shop. And there could be students who don't frequent a coffee shop, who don't
Mhm.
have that familiarity associated with the coffee shop to be able, I mean, depending on the demographics in the school, that you could have a whole classroom of people that do go to
Mhm.
coffee shops, but you could have students that don't. That's
That
not a
don't like
part of their regular routine.
mhm. Don't like
They're not in that
people.
cult. They're not in that culture. Their family, they don't, that's
Mhm.
not what they do. And so they're not in a familiar space. How do
Mhm.
they create the separation? And that would definitely be a judgment space. Uncomfortable judging. I don't like
Mhm.
this. I don't know what to do. What do I do first? Oh,
Mhm.
you're supposed to order coffee first. Oh, okay. Let me do that. I'm not sure.
Mhm.
Like what would you do in that situation?
I mean, I
If they
almost
can't, because let me just add this one additional layer. The idea when they go to this real world space is to begin utilizing what we've been reinforcing in the academic space when it comes to this critical analysis. But now
mhm.
we are in a real world space. And even though you're in the company of other people and it's associated with this academic space,
Mhm.
we're not operating academically now. When you walk
Mhm.
in that front door, I mean, of course, there's a teeny bit of that because I am asking them to capture this experience, which for,
Mhm.
for that age group should be familiar because they
Mhm.
do it already. They take pictures of things, they take pictures of their food, some of them do, some of them don't. That could be another piece of it. But it's also very different because there's nobody telling them how to navigate the space. Okay,
Mhm.
class, first, everybody get in line, order your
Mhm.
coffee. When you get in line, da-da-da, da-da-da, da-da-da. And that's something Ellie and Sarah brought up is that they need parameters. So how do
Mhm.
I deparameterize
Mhm.
a learning experience for people who are used to, I mean, like, how do you, it's so complicated.
Scaffolding. I mean, I think is the because what the question that I would wonder is could you start by having them in a space where you do know that they're all familiar? So have them do that work, but in the
Mm,
classroom.
mm.
Like literally, you know that everyone has been in that space and have them do sort of a smaller version of that in the classroom and work and sit in or some space that like you know that they've all been to. And then so you set the parameters and you sort of set the process.
Mhm.
And
So
then and that's
still
kind of
give them the opportunity to familiar and defamiliar,
yeah.
or
And
you
then I
put
would
them
say
in a
that
situation where like it's all brand new, like they like your
mhm,
study abroad students that are in this
mhm.
totally.
And then I'd be curious to see like what happens after they sort of practice that in that setting, in
Mhm.
in some sort of small capacity, then say, go pick a space. Like, does it, do they
Mhm.
all like I wonder like,
Mhm.
is there value in having them practice it all in a space where you know that they know the
Mhm.
space, and then have them pick a space? Because that's, I mean, like, there's a reason why my satire is the final project, because at the end, I tell them the scaffolding's kind of off, right? I mean, I give them steps and things like that, but they can pick their topic, they can pick their form, their format, they can, all this stuff they
Mhm.
can choose. And it's because we have built them up to the point
I
where I
love
say,
that.
now you should be able to do this. You should be able to think about what are
Mhm.
the tropes of this space. You should be able to observe it. You should be able to sit with this website or sit with this NFL draft videos, and or sit with, whatever it is that you're mocking. And that's the real challenge of how do you do this in a space and in a format that you have completely chosen. And then I tell them as well that they have to be able to explain to me exactly why they've made that choice. One thing that I added this
Oh,
year
I
as we started
love
thinking about the
that
concept.
layer. Mm.
So well, this is, I could go on and on about this one. So one thing that I added this semester, which has been like the greatest thing I feel like I've done in a long time, is that I have turned, they build a thing for me. I mean, I get like ironic juice boxes. They build me websites. They build like I get the full gamut of all kinds of crazy stuff that they
Mhm.
do, and it's whatever they want to pick. But
I
then
love
at
that.
the end of all this, so they have to hand in a thing. They have to turn, I was like, it has to be mixed media. You have to hand in a thing. There has to be some writing, and there has to be, you have to have made all these different rhetorical choices, visual, all this kind of stuff.
Mhm.
And then you have to have a 15-minute oral defense with me, where I look at
Stop
your
it.
project
I
and
love that.
I do a 15-minute oral defense, and I say, and the thing is, you're responsible for every single decision on there, and you need to tell me why you made it. Like, and sometimes I throw some softball questions at them, like, what's your favorite choice you've made? Things like that, that are kind of standardized. But I'll point out this pattern that you have over here. Like, why do you have the character doing this, speaking in this voice over here? And it's fascinating. It's also fascinating to hear the students talk to each other about their choices while I'm sort of like on the other side of the room. They're working, they're in their workshop mode. And they're
Mhm.
like, but man, how are you going to defend that? Like, what are you going to, you're, why would you choose to do that? And I had a lot of kids tell me this semester that knowing that they could be put on the spot for any of their choices
Mhm.
made them think so much harder about their choices. Like, why
Mhm.
am I doing this? And I was like, great, that's what I want you to do.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
And
I
they were
love that.
fascinating conversations. They were really, really interesting conversations. And sometimes they convinced me of some things that like I didn't immediately see. And I was like,
Mhm.
that's really lovely. And maybe some of it was they were, making some stuff up on the spot, but I'm like, but at least you know how to analyze.
And so the unfamiliar space becomes the final test of
Hmm.
whether they have learned how to develop and maintain their voice despite
Hmm.
whatever mode of communication they've been practicing with.
Yep.
And then we can get them into the real world space for that test.
Hmm.
That is a nice continuum. I
Because
love that.
what I tell them is that, again, we're training you for the world. And I said, I
Yep.
mean, because of course one of the things that we're worried about a lot is students with AI, and helping them figure out what this new world's going to be, and asking ourselves like, what are
Mhm.
we even training them for? And I said, I'm when you sit in a board meeting, or when you sit in your architecture firm, or in your doctor's, whatever,
Yep.
someone's going to ask you a question, and you need to be able to think. You
Mhm.
can't sit there and generate. I was like, that's what I need you to be able to do, and you need to be able to explain, why did I do the thing based on all the stuff that I saw? Why was this the choice that I made? I was like, that's what I can say you definitely are going to need to be able to do in this world.
Yep.
The world is changing, but you need to do that no matter what field you're going into. So I'm going to train
Absolutely.
you to do that. I'm going to
Hmm.
train you to sit with this. And again, in that uncomfortable space
Hmm.
where they don't know what questions they're going to be asked. And I ask them some hard questions. And I thought about making it just like 5 or 10 minutes. I was like, no, I'm going to grill you for 15 minutes and have you really tell me the story of how did you build this thing, and why did you make all these choices? And it was really interesting as well, because at some point someone asked me, Like, this just opened up a lot of possibilities. I said, well, could I include some AI generated images in my piece? And I said,
Mhm.
sure, that's
Mhm.
totally fine. But you're responsible for every pixel in that image, which means that you need to go through enough iterations that you can tell me why you picked version 27
Mhm.
and not version 31.
Yep. Yep. But they
So
have to
again,
know their
choice,
intention. They have
choice
to
and
know their
agency.
intention to be able to do that. They have to know their intention. Oh, this is so good.
Yeah.
Listen, I do an exercise with my 1102 class. That
Hmm.
was, that's a research. I take them through the whole research process, and they do end with a multimodal composition. But we sit around a big, huge round table, and they have to tell me what they believe.
Hmm.
I don't want to hear that, this one student wanted to convince us that we should be taking some kind of supplements going to the GNC store. And I'm like, nope, 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 nope. My body came here with what it needs.
Hmm.
And that's what I'm trying to maintain. What
Hmm.
as close to the original from
Hmm.
1974 as possible.
Hmm.
Okay. With no deviations from that.
Hmm.
Because I believe that my body can heal itself. Now, you tell me why you believe people should take these supplements. And it's like, but by the end of when it's time to actually start unpacking everything, I can go,
Hmm.
"Ooh, I believe, I believe, I believe, I believe,
Hmm.
I believe, I believe, I believe, I believe." And then the work is embodied. Let me now, Ellie and Sarah, and for those listening to this podcast, definitely go back and listen to the episode when the community becomes the classroom with Ellie
Dupre.
Dupre.
Ellie Dupre and Sarah J.
And
Two of
she
my
gave
colleagues.
me a whole thing for her last name, Dupre. Dupre. I do pray. Yes. So Ellie Dupre, and Sarah J, where we talk about the ways in which they're using AI. Dig into that just a little bit, and then I'm going to ask you maybe one or two more questions and we'll wrap. Just
Hmm.
dig in, like, what's your, because a lot of people, especially in higher education, now
Hmm.
I've been able to enlighten people with this concept of bringing balancing the rhetorical agency with the modality use so they see
Hmm.
AI as a modality. And so
Hmm.
the work that we do to bring them into and embody what it is they're producing creates this collaborative relationship with this tool
Hmm.
versus the tool guiding their perspective and writing for them and so on and so.
Hmm.
So what's your AI belief? How about we do that since I believe? What do you believe about AI?
So, I mean, I believe it's like anything else. It is a tool, but I also believe that it's part of my role to help my students see and use it as a tool and understand how to use it as a tool
Mm-hmm.
and not use it as a crutch. And so we talk about that distinction where we look at it in a lot of different ways. I mean, honestly, I start the year with it's some, early in the year we talk about AI, and I was like, first of all, how many of you actually know what it is?
Mm-hmm.
How many of you actually know how it functions? How many of you know what's happening when you type in a prompt?
Mm-hmm.
And most of them don't, or they'll raise their hands and they'll have a pretty slim definition. Well, it just so happens that my fiance is a computer programmer, and so he sent me some really good articles. And so, like, we talk about it as being a language generator, and we talk about the way it's functioning, and we talk about the way that it chooses the words and everything, and we
Mm-hmm.
distinguish it. So like, he actually doesn't even like the term AI because he's like, it's not intelligent. It's just a language generator. It is just picking a you know, a commonly used word, sort of not the most commonly used word, because when they picked the most commonly used words, it sounded super robotic. And so they literally just sat there and tweaked it, and went, I don't know, let's this percentage. I mean, so that's, I think a lot of it is just by starting to be like, okay, you need to, like anything else, you need to understand what this is. So let's start there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Again, agency, if you're going to choose to use this thing, and then just
Mm-hmm.
clarity in terms of when they can use it and how they can use it. So there's an
Mm-hmm.
assignment that I have them do where as a class, we write a prompt on the board, and then I say, and the prompt is basically, um, I had this experience as a child and I'm trying to figure out something about this. Please ask me questions about this experience, but only respond to my responses with questions. Like that's specifically the prompt because we want to treat it as I said we're sort of treating it as a counselor, but then we also go on this get on my little soapbox and I'm like, why is it not a counselor? Why doesn't it work? You need to understand that this is that it is it's kind of sycophantic and like I want them to understand again how the tool
And I can
functions. This is
choose, like
important.
I can tell it, only give me positive feedback.
Well, exactly, but it's even you don't even have to do that. It is already programmed to kind of lean that
There's a way
direction.
you can tell it to be more critical. At least with ChatGPT, there is.
Yes.
Yeah.
But anyway, so again, it just comes back to
Nuts.
understand what you're
Yeah.
using.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And just being really clear and coming
Mhm.
back to that conversation. So we had a number of students who were in our Model UN club, and we sort of started off the years with an exercise and said, okay, Model UN requires you to solve problems in the world. Let's start at home and we're going to practice setting up some ideas that you're going to present to the administration of our school
Mhm.
about AI use here. And, what do you see
Love
as being
that.
the problems?
Ownership.
What do you see? What are your suggestions?
Mhm.
And then some of those kids sat down with our head of school and assistant head and the principals, and
Ooh, you just
Sarah
gave
was
me
one
an
of them.
idea.
And but they sat down and it was really interesting to see the head of school sit there and ask them and say, so do you feel like you don't have, do you feel like our AI policy, you need more than that? And they're like, the school's AI policy is not enough. It's not clear. And, he said, well, how many of your teachers are talking about this in the classroom? How many teachers are clarifying how you can use it? And they just walked through and talked through, and
Mhm.
it was very clear that the students want guidance and they're also not sure,
Mhm.
and they feel like a lot of their teachers are uncomfortable talking about it and they just sort of want it to go away. Well, it's
Mhm.
not,
Mhm.
right? And so we do just kind of need to face it head on. And so like, I mean, I think that that's my best way to say is like, and I'll just say, here's where you can use it, here's how you can't use it. And
Mhm.
then I'll also, when they are doing like they're brainstorming or something, I don't let them go to a Google Doc
Mhm.
until I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 days of brainstorming in. I'll give them like different questions. And
Mhm.
then I talk to them very directly. We just have lots of meta
Mhm.
conversations about
Mhm.
why do you think I'm keeping you on paper for this long? And
Mhm.
one of the great things that one of my kids said was because we can't delete anything. And we have to just kind of stay in this collecting phase in the same way that you can easily delete stuff on a Google Doc. They're like, no, actually I just have to kind of keep this kind of journal and diary. But it's
Mhm.
it was interesting for them to just go, okay, here's the benefit of this.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
then just talk very directly about why are we doing what we're doing.
Mhm.
I talked to them about the oral defenses. The oral defenses came out of the fact that I was tired of wondering whether they'd actually done something.
Mhm.
And I talked, I was like, why do you think I'm doing this? And they're like, well, one reason is it's kind of AI proof. And I'm like, yeah,
Yep.
it's
If you
like you
can't
have to,
talk about it, then you're not,
yeah.
you didn't do this work. You don't understand it. You can't speak to it. If you can't speak to it, it's yes, no.
So the long answer to your short question
Mhm.
is that I think just being really frank, of being very
Mhm.
transparent and being very meta with the kids about
Mhm.
why are we doing what we're doing? What am I trying to get you to learn? And have
Mhm.
them come up with those answers.
Mhm.
And again, talk through all of these different aspects of the tool as we come to understand what it is and what it does. And then also, again, I think the other key is showing them that I'm willing to walk into that uncertain space where, I mean, and I'll just tell them, I am trying to figure out what is my role as a teacher
Mhm.
of English, a teacher of
Mhm.
composition in this world, and saying,
Mhm.
I'm not fully comfortable and I don't fully know the answer to that, but we're working on figuring that out together. That's what we're doing. So
Mhm.
I have to be willing to walk into that uncertain space and
Yep.
go, the onions, I'm peeling back my assumptions and I'm just trying to best understand
Mhm.
what can I do for you because the world is changing so fast and
Yep.
I can't anticipate where it's going, but I'm just doing the best I can. So I think that transparency is
Well,
just
it
key.
also reinforces that we're all just human beings at the end of the day, and we're all figuring things out together, and we're all
Mhm.
like, so the syllabus for my class is co-written. But
Mhm.
the way I have it situated now, each section is either written by me or written by them. Now,
Mm-hmm.
what's written by me, they can scrutinize, and that's when I start teaching them the comment feature in Word so that they can highlight things that they don't understand or don't agree with or whatever it
Mm-hmm.
is, and we can begin having that dialogue, and they can begin bringing that rhetorical agency to their learning and
Mm-hmm.
hope, throughout the semester. But you just gave me an idea. The AI section should be
Mm-hmm.
co-written.
I think it would be really fascinating to hear from your
Mhm.
students what they need, what they understand, what they want to know,
But
what
around the
guidelines.
policies associated with the institution as well, so they
Mm-hmm.
understand that, having rhetorical agency does also mean cooperation, being able
Mm-hmm.
to make adjustments, being able
Mm-hmm.
to, be aware of how you need to adjust and operate within spaces. This was so good.
This is a fascinating conversation.
You're
Yeah.
fire. You are the best. You're the
Well,
best.
thank you very much. This has been an absolutely fascinating conversation. And despite
Seriously.
the best compliment I can give you is I am I have been up doing yard work since like 6 o'clock this morning.
You're back to the
And
flow.
so the fact that I am this fascinated by this
Yeah.
conversation is a
Yeah.
real testament to
Okay.
you.
Okay.
So that is kudos to you
Thank
for
you.
some good questions and good, yeah, and this has made me do some
I
good
mean, the
thinking as
fact that this
well.
is happening at your level creates an awareness for me
Hmm.
about the funnel
Hmm.
that these students go through where they're landing in these Ivy Leagues with
Hmm.
this perspective.
Hmm.
And I haven't been in that environment, so I don't really know. I mean, I worked at WashU. I was a publications assistant for School of Law, but
Hmm.
as a student in those, I've done some poetry workshops at WashU in the summer. But we're talking about WashU, but these students they're going to Harvard and Yale and
Hmm.
different
Some of them.
spaces with
Hmm.
this perspective. It's I'm getting students at Kennesaw State, at Georgia State University, who
Hmm.
are very uncomfortable
Hmm.
with this type of shift.
I mean, and what I hear there is, and I think this is when you hear conflict and resistance, and again, I'd have to, look at the larger circumstance, but my mind immediately goes to confidence. Like when you hear the kid that's like, just tell me what to do, and I'm
Yep,
saying, well, you can look at all the options you have, and they're like, but just tell me what to do, and it's like,
absolutely.
and so much of what it is again coming back to the agency piece of agency and pride and confidence, the confidence that the choices that they make when they have agency will
Yep,
be good. And the problem is that they're so afraid
yep.
of taking a risk.
To come out
And
of
how
that.
do you help them? The key is how do you help them in all these small ways take risks and then go, oh, that was kind of
Mhm.
cool what I did. Okay, now I'm
Yep,
ready for the next risk. Now I'm
yep,
ready for the next jump. Now
yep,
I'm ready for the next thing.
yep.
And when you watch it, it's lovely. And when a kid's not ready to go there, they're just not there. Yeah,
Mhm.
it's frustrating, but everyone has this, goes through this process at a different time and is, and ready in different spaces. So for some kids, they're not ready yet. And like you said,
Yeah.
it might be, something that again, it's a long-term investment what we're doing here. And maybe it's something that they circle back around to in a couple years and they go, oh, that's what she was
Mhm.
talking.
Mhm. Mhm.
But
Mhm.
I think there's so much of a confidence piece. I see that with a lot. I
Yep.
still see that with a lot of my kids because they'll walk in and they'll tell me, well, I'm not really a writer.
Mhm.
I mean, just the need to declare that,
Yep.
well, I don't really consider myself a writer.
Mhm.
That's a boy, is that a wall? Boy, is that a
Mhm.
defense? Boy,
Mhm.
is that a don't see me this way because I don't want to risk the possibility that I can't write, right? So I
Mhm.
can't even consider that. I'm
Mhm.
not a writer. I'm not a writer. I don't see
Which
myself that way.
completely stifles what we really want is for them to have something to say.
Exactly. And the fear, what they're afraid of is that they don't. And
Mhm,
so it comes back to, again, the performance. So they perform,
mhm,
like you said, they
mhm.
perform, they get
Yep.
into and so I don't know. I think a lot of it is giving them the space to make mistakes, to say those maybes, to
Mhm.
say those
Like that, the maybes.
uncertain things.
Maybe
Um,
this, maybe that, maybe this.
Sometimes I just get them to list on the board and, we'll just go through like, all right, we've been talking about this book for like a few weeks now.
Mhm,
What are the questions that you've wanted to ask, but you haven't been willing to because you've been afraid to?
mhm,
And I'm like, let's get a couple
I don't
of
understand the vocabulary. I read the
Yeah.
whole first section and I have no idea what they're talking about. Like, I would
Well,
love for them to come out and do that.
yeah, exactly. And then having them go and to be like, wow, that's really useful. And in here,
I
that it's
walked into the
useful.
coffee shop and my family doesn't frequent one. They won't say frequent possibly, but I mean, I certainly wasn't at that age. I didn't know what to do first.
Oh, it's terrifying to be the one.
I'll never, like, I would never go to a coffee shop. And because I feel like I never would, then I just want to sit in this corner. I want to hear
No
about
one,
that too, though.
no one wants to feel like the outsider. No one wants to feel like the one person in the room who's going to say the thing. I mean, one thing that in terms of with confidence that I tell kids and I'll to try to, again, help with that gap is I say, look, anytime you ask a question, you are minimally helping 3 people in that room. And I'm like, tell me who are the 3 people? And they're like, me, the teacher. I said, yeah, because the teacher needs to know, your professor needs to know what you do and do not understand. And I said, who's that 3rd person? And they're like, someone else in the room. I was like, I guarantee you someone else in the room has that question. And when they
Seriously.
start to see questions as a service for some kids, that's helpful because it's like, oh, I'm not outing myself as stupid or, whatever, as the one person who doesn't know. Like, I'm actually doing a service right now. And that for some kids that can help, but it's tricky. And some kids, like I said, are just not ready. And so if you figure out more ways to get them over that gap, please tell me because I'm always looking for more.
I've developed a few, but it's still, All right. So in closing, you're doing phenomenal work. And the fact that you're doing it at the level that you're doing it, my hat is off to you. Like, such amazing experiences they're having. But what excites you about this? Like, what excites you the most about, helping them to get to this space?
Oh, lots of things. I mean, I'm excited by the kid who walks into my classroom and tells me from the beginning that they're not a writer and who by the end has several pieces that they're proud of. And they're like, oh, like, I mean, so much of it
Didn't
is
know
about,
they could write such a long.
yeah, because so much of it is this process in seeing the world is also seeing themselves in a new light. And recognizing that in the same way that there are all these different perspectives on the world that they haven't quite considered, it also helps them realize that they have all these dimensions and that there are all these possibilities and they don't have to step into all of them, but but there are like, maybe I could do this, maybe I could do that. Like, if you can get a kid to a place where they're like, oh, maybe I could do this thing, great. Like, that's what excites me. The possibility of a kid at least being able to contemplate other sides of themselves and the world around them. Fantastic.
I love that.
Mic drop.
Definitely makes for a better human being at the end of the day. And that is the mic drop. And with that, we thank you for coming. You guys,
Thank you very much
stay
for
tuned for
having
the
me,
next
Tiffany.
one. It's going to be so good.
Thank you for listening to Educate Us. Educate Us is a podcast and learning collective of TMS Visionary Group. All podcast content is protected by copyright. Copyright 2026 TMS Visionary Group, all rights reserved. New episodes are released every Monday. Thank you for joining the conversation.